Join us in March for a series of creative webinars showing time-saving video editing techniques for Premiere Pro, Avid Media Composer, DaVinci Resolve, and Final Cut Pro. We'll show you how you can use Red Giant Universe in all of these hosts to easily add attention, getting effects to your editing timeline, and accelerate your edit times while still producing amazing visuals.
Hey, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Mystifying Post Productions webinar with me, Max. And today we are joined by our guest, Tony, Anthony Bari, and also Jason is still here with us because Jason has something to share with us as well today. And let me share my screen. Tony, Jason, how are you?
Doing well.
Awesome.
Same here.
And some people are already coming to the chat, to the stream. And Yolana is there. Silver Aruna is also there. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. And I really look forward for you guys to learn or pick up some tips and techniques from us three today. And let me point you out to this website. If you go to maxon.net/events, you'll be able to check all the events that is hosted by Maxon Training Team. So, for example, today, you as you can see in the website that there's a Demystifying Post-Productions webinar happening. And in today's webinar, we'll be talking more about Universe inside DaVinci Resolve, be it in the cut page, be it in the edit page, and in the color page, and also in Fusion. And this Thursday, there will be Ask the Trainer with Jonas and Noseman. And also on Friday, Hashi and Seth will be back with the VFX and Chill. And also next week on Monday, that would be our last Demystifying Post-Productions webinar sessions. And in that session, Tony will talk us about a Universe in Final Cut Pro. Right, Tony?
Yep.
Well, I'm really looking forward to that. And so if you go to the descriptions of the event today in YouTube, if you go to the descriptions, click more, you'll be able to see the link to Dropbox. And inside that PDF file, inside that link, you'll be able to find a PDF file. And in the PDF file, you'll see that there is a link that you can use to get a free t-shirt. So if you follow that link, you'll be redirected into this shop page, and you can get one of these goodies for you. And you just need to use the password to enter the shop so that you won't have to pay for that merchandise. You just need to pay for the small shipping costs. And if you are wondering where to find the recording from last sessions or any session hosted by Maxon Training Team, you can go to YouTube and search for Maxon Training Team, and there you'll be able to find all the recording. And what's nice with that recording is that every single webinars are timestamped. So if you really want to follow and just jump right into the topics and skip me like blabbering like at the moment, you can just skip that, hit the time stamps, and go to the topic that you exactly want. And thank you so much, Dr. Sasi, for doing the time stamps. It's really awesome from you. And yeah, that's it, I think, for from my part. And as we all know, today we will learn a little bit about Universe inside DaVinci Resolve. And before I start, Tony and Jason, do you have anything to add, or can I just jump in and start right away?
Jump in.
I think you could jump in.
Awesome. Cool. And yeah, I hope I'm sure some of you guys in the audience probably already familiar with Resolve, but bear in mind that in DaVinci Resolve, what's unique is that you got several different pages, and in these several different pages, you can still find the universe effects living on them. So, for example, if you are in Cut page, and by the way, I'm in a Cut page, and I have a timeline cut for us today. And at first, probably when you are in Cut page, you probably feel like, oh, it's a little bit more intuitive. How do I move my playhead here? So if I move my playhead in this big timeline, it feels like, oh, it's a reverse. But actually, when you are doing that, when you're scrubbing your playhead in the big timeline here, you're actually scrubbing the clip left and right. Your playhead is actually the big timeline playhead is actually staying right in the middle of the screen. But if you're familiar with the behavior of playhead in another nonlinear editor, that would be like in the small timeline here. So if you grab the playhead in the small timeline, if you move it left and right, you'll be able to get exactly the same behavior in like another NLE. And also, actually, that's exactly the behavior of the playhead inside the edit page. So in Cut page, it is like really awesome if you just want to cut like a very quick timeline to do a little promo or so. And in Cut page, if you want to find transitions, because you know in Universe, there are tons of transitions that you can use. You can click the windows here, right on the top. There's like transitions options. So if you click that, you'll have another window, and it's just for transitions. So under search, if you type in uni and dot, you'll see all the transitions available inside Universe, right? And you can just, like, for example, just drag and drop the transitions either in the big timeline at the bottom, or you can also do it in the small timeline at the top. And also, before you drag and drop that transitions, if you click this three dots over here next to the search bar, there are like these three dots. And if you click that, you need to activate hover scrub preview. So for instance, if you go over one transitions over here, and if you just like scrub it on the transitions, you don't need to click, just hover over and scrub it, you'll see the preview of the transition right away. So that's the transitions in Cut page. But then in Universe, there's not just like transitions, right? We have plenty. Like, for example, if you go to the website maxon.com, and hang on, give it some time. Sorry, maxon.net. Come on, Max. If you go to maxon.net and you go to products, Universe, you'll see that in Universe, there are 5 different categories of effects. The first one is generators. Generators it just means that the effects create something out of nothing. So if you want a background or
Yes, it looks like Max has
Yeah.
been dumped out.
Yep. I give him 30 seconds. He'll probably be back on. And I think we're still live here, right?
Yes, I think we are. People are still
All
commenting.
right.
So
Okay.
it looks like
We could
do you have
possibly.
control?
Yeah, let me see if I can just share. I'll share my screen in the meantime. See if it allows for me to do this. Let's see. And then I can pick up where I believe he left off. And that's just showing but he has to allow me to. Yeah, can you see my screen share?
No.
Yep. He has to allow me to share. So but you know, I think what is that? As soon as he hops back on, yeah,
The joys of internet technology.
I love it. I love it. Oh, we could talk about the cut page and how it's available on the iPad as well. So you can, if you have a little keyboard and you have an iPad or it's an iPad Pro, and I think even the M1 model, M2 model, and maybe the model just before, just changes the different types of features that you have available. But you do have the cut page available on an iPad as well. So, but in the meantime, let's see. I think he was just kind of highlighting that you can go in the browser and just kind of go to where it shows that you have transitions available. Ooh, this is inverted. So where you have transitions available, and he was just basically highlighting the fact that you can go type in the word universe or uni, UNI, and then you're going to see it'll pop up, and all the universe effects will pop up on there. So you don't you can go by effects like the OFX, or you can go by the transitions, and just by typing in UNI, it separates. So I think that was the last thing that he was talking about. I don't know. Do you have?
William's
have
just asking
control?
if the Universe plugins are available on DaVinci on the iPad, and it looked to me like you were just on the iPad and they are all there.
Yeah, the universe effects are not necessarily on there. That's like the effects in general are there, but not
Oh, so not the Red
not the,
Giant ones necessarily.
yeah. So what I would do is you can pre-bake those, and then just kind of pre-bake your effects. So if you're doing this with the intention of doing something online, I mean, doing something on the iPad, then I would pre-bake that, and you can basically send that over to any hard drive, and then now you can even make proxy versions of this. But yeah, unfortunately, on the iPad, as of right now, you can't use it. Just to answer that question, William. What I would say is you could even go through and do like host stuff via the cloud in Resolve, which I've done once or twice. Or if you want to use, I know for a fact you can use Frame.io. There's another NLE for the iPad. I think it's Luma Studio, and you can pull up your Frame.io and use that as a disk, like as an air disk if you want. And there's also, I think there's the Western Digital Air Disk, and you can utilize that and maybe just kind of render to that portable drive, and then utilize the effect like that. But yeah, as of right now, the iPad editing is pretty new, at least at this level where you get a desktop class application and be able to use it on the iPad. Do you have screen sharing available on your end, Jason?
No, unfortunately, I'm in as a guest, so I can see my screen ready to go. But again, Max would have to activate it.
I love it. So in the meantime, what we could do, let's see, maybe I could hop in here and just kind of see if I can pull up any effects. But any effects that I'd be able to show on here are just basically the standalone effects that are on Resolve. And then if you do get Resolve on the iPad, it's another $100 to have, or $95 to have the studio version, which allows you to do the tracking and all the fancy stuff that you can do on your desktop. But I believe it's worth it. $100, and it's, I think, a one-time fee. But let's see if I can, and I could check on Max too in the meantime as well. I want to say his computer probably crashed. That's a safe bet. So let's just see.
It's always annoying in the middle of a show, but it just shows it happens to us all.
Absolutely. We're all
I had the same
humans
thing 2 weeks ago. I was
working
doing
on computers.
I was doing the Universe demo on Premiere and my Premiere crashed. And in fact, this morning playing with Fusion, I managed to break Fusion with a tool.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think there's no stopping computers from crashing. You always need a human brain behind the computer, keep it moving. So the hardest part about this is our screen shares are pretty limited, but we could talk through some ideas. I think Jason was gonna do jump onto the Fusion page, and then what we can do when Max gets back, we can talk through applying Universe effects in the color page, in the edit page, and in the cut page. And each way is very similar, and even talk about showcasing a nest. So you can basically either make a compound clip, or you can go just create a timeline, put what you want on that timeline, and then now take that timeline into another timeline and put the effect on it one time. And that's good for something that's subtle, not something that has maybe way too much contrast or changes the overall idea if all your clips are coming from different environments and different colors. So, but Jason, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I guess I could fill in a bit of background that I was going to do on my section, but
yeah,
I've put together a little demo in Fusion, which I actually used over 20 years ago when I was based in Australia. It was the main compositing system I used, and when I moved to the UK in 2001, everyone here uses After Effects, so I sort of became more about After Effects in the UK because that's what all the freelance work was in and sharing. So it was interesting to see Fusion was bought by DaVinci Resolve, and I had to play with it, and it's amazing. It works quite similar to it used to. But it's quite nice that all the Red Giant tools work in it, so it's quite cool because I found it quite a useful addition. And I personally quite like the idea of node-based compositing as opposed to After Effects, which is all layering and pre-composing layers. It can all get a bit confusing, whereas I find node-based, you can sort of group your tools into little pockets that do certain jobs, and you can go and add layers in really easily. So when I get to show you the demos I've done, there were things like I added a tool this morning that I thought looked good, and it's quite early in the composition. Whereas in After Effects, doing that sort of thing can be quite complicated because of the way things are nested and pre-comped.
Well, I'll add one comment to that. If you get a chance, anybody, and you haven't, if you already have Maxon 1, you can use Super Comp, and that changes your way of navigating After Effects and comps. So, but I think I saw a comment here. Jesus wants to know if we were talking about the differences between Fusion and the Resolve page, or Fusion like standalone Fusion. Maybe you could touch on that a little bit, Jason, since you've seen the difference between Fusion by itself and then Fusion that got jammed into Resolve.
Well, I think that question is sort of more about the studio and the free version. So a good example is what I'm going to demonstrate is on the free version, because I don't use Fusion professionally. As I say, I've probably used Fusion for about 3 or 4 hours in the last 20 years. So the extra things, I'd imagine it's probably similar to the color pages, where there's probably additional tracking capabilities. And obviously I don't have many output options, but I'm using it just to play with. So for me, the studio version hasn't been a necessity as yet. I quite like Fusion and sort of getting back into it. So I might end up getting the studio version at some point. But because I already use Avid and the Adobe tools, it's kind of just another tool that does a similar job.
There's no problem with extra tools, especially before, when the landscape was a lot smaller. Now you have this many more NLEs to play with. I think it's a lot better to jump out to another NLE in case for a fact it takes you an hour in one, and then it might take you 15 minutes in the other.
Well, exactly. A lot of the consulting work I do regularly is talking to clients about which NLE to use for certain projects, and that's always quite complicated because they all have different advantages. And if you're on the social media groups, like on Facebook, there's groups of people. There's always a battle that DaVinci is better than Adobe and Adobe is better than Avid, and one wins an Academy Award, and they all sort of like to blow their trumpets.
Yes.
Nothing's perfect. They're all brilliant in their own ways, and some of them do things really well that others don't do as well. And it's kind of a compromise of picking the right tool for the job, or in my case, being a freelancer, you tend to use what the company has that you're working for. So a lot of the work I do, I go and work for a client who already has 100%. All their edit suite set up, and I just sit in their room and operate their equipment.
Yep. I think half the time you have no choice, depending on where you're sitting. So you could bring your laptop. I brought my laptop, and I've done things in After Effects relatively quick that I couldn't necessarily do well inside of any NLE. So, it's always good to just have a side machine to kind of just to get the workflow moving faster. So, I think I do know that each one of these has a different set of tools, but at the same time, for a fact that you're strong at one, it doesn't hurt to hop into that. So
yeah, or at least an understanding of all of them.
Yeah.
I see Matt's asked a question about automatic duck to
Yes.
help round trip a timeline from Resolve into After Effects. From my personal experience, I probably wouldn't be doing that because I tend to use After Effects more for treating shots and building up sort of single graphic shots. So it'd be more a case of I might send a shot to After Effects. But obviously you can find the media, you can link to where the media is on your drive. So rather than cutting a sequence to put into After Effects to treat, I suppose you could do that.
I think it's just an extra step, to be honest, Matt. Like, I think you need to send it to Premiere and then allow Premiere to handle that, and that's probably your easiest way. So if you just do like a flat cut and you turn it into an XML, that's probably your best bet. Or you can render it out, and if you keep all your time code consistent, you can do it that way as well. But if you need handle and stuff like that, so if you wanted to make sure that you kept that part intact, I would highly recommend two things. You could export everything as individual clips, and you can render out your full timeline and flatten that as well. But there's no, to my knowledge, there might be one here in the atmosphere, in the universe somewhere, but as far as I know, taking something to After Effects is because it's different party, software, like we're mentioning Fusion. The idea would be kind of Fusion is inside of the Blackmagic atmosphere environment, and then Adobe would be the After Effects environment. But I would say two things I would do is maybe just do an individual export and do one as individual clips, and then do one as the exporting the individual clips and then exporting the flat cut. And actually now you can take the flat cut and you can do the scene detection. So if you do scene detection inside of Adobe, you can also turn those all into subclips, and those get treated like they were actual clips. So that might be the easiest way to pipe it into After Effects, and then allow Adobe to send it to After Effects. Of course, before you send it into After Effects, maybe drag it up. Just do an option drag up of the exact copy replica of your timeline to a V2, and then send that, because once you send it over, now it kind of changes it and makes it into this sent for After Effects linked comp. So
I think something that's sort of slightly different to that, because I do a lot of work on Avid and quite often do want to treat things in After Effects. I suppose it's a similar answer, but quite often I'll carry my laptop, which has Avid with all my After Effects with all my plugins, and a number of clients I work for, I'll render out a sequence in Avid and do exactly what you just said. I'll take that as a collapsed video into After Effects and do treatment to it there, and then bring it back into Avid. So it doesn't give me handles or anything like that, but as long as you've sort of got your video locked, it works quite well.
So Max,
hello everybody. I'm back.
We're glad to have you back. So
I just lost my internet connections, and I'm really sorry that it happens.
And it happens to everybody.
Sorry. Yeah.
So I'm sure everybody here on the internet watching understands, because it's happened to pretty much everyone. I was going to say what we just started talking through was like, how do you get something from Resolve into After Effects? How you get something from Avid into After Effects?
Yes.
And we're just talking about scene detection, and that Adobe has scene detection as well. Or you can export individual clips with time code, and you can kind of rejoin things as needed. So just to catch you up, and
thank you so much.
Let's allow you to share, just so we can catch up here on time.
Thank you so much, everybody, for staying tuned with us. And I'm really sorry that I lost my internet today. And So let's get back. And previously, I was talking to you about the cut page, right? And in the cut page, to search just the transitions, there's a window only for the transitions. And if you want to look for another effects inside Universe or another effects that available in Resolve, that would be inside the effects panel up there right next to the transitions. And here you can literally find any effects available inside Universe that is non-transitions. And for example, if you type in Uni and dot, you'll see all the type of effects that you will be able to use inside cut page. So for example, there's stylize, there's blur, utilities, motion graphics, and so on, right? So instead of showing you to use it inside the cut page, why won't we move on into the edit page and let me show you where to find the effects inside the edit page, right? And normally when you start new in Resolve, this is what you see in your screen, right? And you won't be able to see where's your effects, where's your controls, and so on. But that's because it is hidden. All you need to do is you need to select your effects and it will be available in the left side of the screen. So, and what's nice here is that you have like this option to extend the size of the panel. So for example, when you have the panel extended, you'll be able to, for example, preview your media pool and your effects.
Sorry,
and then
Max, is it worth making the screen bigger and getting rid of the cameras just
Oh,
so
yeah,
they can
sure.
see more of it?
Sorry. Yes, there you go. And here, if you select OpenFX and then type in Uni dot, and you'll find all the Universe effects, and the transitions will also be inside this effect panel as well. So there is no separations between transitions and effect panel and the effects, right? Once you use an effect, so for example, if I'm using Sketchify here, just drag and drop it to my clip, you will be wondering where is the control panel, but that is because you need to open the inspector. Once you open the inspector and go to effects up there, you'll be able to see all the controls for Sketchify. And if you already following the presentation from Jason last week, the usage is like literally the same, and you can save presets, and you can also choose a preset. Once you click choose a preset, you'll have a preset window. So the difference in Premiere Pro and Resolve, for example, is that in Premiere Pro you have like this the effect browser, so to say. But here we don't have the effects browser, but we have the presets window. And same like in the cut page, if you turn on the hover scrub preview, same like before, anytime you hover over an effect, you'll get the preview of the effects. So all you need to do is that first select your clip and then go to the effects, and you can start to hover over and scrub on top of your effects, and you'll be able to see what the effects is actually doing. And that's actually a very neat thing to do before just drag and dropping and seeing what the effects is actually doing in your screen. So since Universe is like a collection of candies, so to say, there are plenty of effects that you can use. I sometimes do this for auditioning or to inspires me to create some effects. And in today's presentations, instead of me showing what every single effects is actually doing, why don't we break down some scenes and let's see how we can recreate that scenes using Universe inside Resolve. So I hope you're ready for that. The first one is like very simple scene like this. So at first we have like everything blurred with a bokeh blur, and you have like a title on the lower third, and then it has a shadow that going from inside the text, and it's protruding outside the text, and that is literally achieved by exactly using another text tool inside Resolve. So if I'm typing in text in my effects panel, and go to my toolbox, I have like 2 different texts that I can use. So first one, I can just select the text, not the text plus. Text plus, it's like the similar basic text, but it has more controls. So in this case, the normal text is just fine. So you can just type in, this is my text, and then you can select any font that you like. Let's go with something like Roboto. Roboto slab, and then after that I can change my size, and then after that, by going into settings, I will be able to play with my positioning. So I'll position my text into the lower third, and here I can first compound my text and create. And what I can do is that I can type in, first I need to clear it and go to my OpenFX, and I can type in my long shadow. Because by using long shadow, you can have like this effects, like the shadow protruding out of your text. And you can play around with the angle. So first one, I'll go to my effects panel, play around with the angle, maybe minus 145, something like that. And what's nice with Universe, as Jason already pointed out before, is that every parameter is keyframeable. So in this case, I'll just play around with the length. At the beginning, it's 0 at the keyframe, and perhaps moving like around 12 or 6 frames, and at perhaps 120, something like this, or maybe even more, 250. Yes, that's it. And by just doing that, I managed to animate my long shadow. And as you can see before, we have like this things going on here. And that is just simply by using Holomatrix. So if I'm searching for Holomatrix and drag and drop it onto my text, I got that like really easy. And from here, for me, I can just browse a presets. Of course, not the long shadow. I'll go to my Holomatrix, open it, and choose a presets. A new presets window will be opened, and I can search for something nice that I like, maybe teal, something like this. And by playing around with all this parameter, you can affect how your effect looks like, right? So what I did here in this text is that I use long shadow and Holomatrix. Meanwhile, on the background, I'm using just the box bokeh. In the beginning, it is full blurred at 40. And as I move like 6 frames or something, I reduce the amount into 0. And that's how I can create like this effects like really quick. And the next one is that, sometimes I use Universe to create like a fancy thing that looks like that. And I think I have the baked in video if you want to, if we can play it. So let me preview the video. Right. And those are actually created by using text and a simple background. And the way how I create that is that simply by creating a solid background. Here in Resolve, if I go to generators, I can select solid color. And if I drag and drop it, I can start to select what color do I want. Maybe here, let's play around with blue, or maybe that blue over here. Okay, and same as before, let me just compound it. Why not? And on top of that, same as before, we're using text. Okay, and here, same as before, we'll use the text. And I'll search for the font that I like. Maybe same as before, we'll use Roboto, slab. There you go. And play around with the size and then the tracking. Something like this. So I quite like it. Maybe give it a different color, something like that. And now I can compound it. And what I'm going to do next is actually literally just like adding style onto this. And in order to do that, the first thing that I'm going to use is dropping in luster onto this text to give the text a little bit of dimensions. So as you can see, when we drop luster, we have like this beveled and glassy looking text. And I can play around with the presets. For example, by opening the presets, I can choose any type of this text. But if I want to, I can also tweak them by myself. So for example, I change the source color to be using the original color. And since I don't want it to look like glass, I can go into the bevel area and reduce the glassiness, maybe down to 5, something like that. So really quick, we go from here into there, right? And with some extra shadow. The next thing is that I want to like give some movement onto this text. And if we see here, the movement is actually was driven by the effects called Texturized Motions. So that's what I'm going to do next. I can do a movement and search for Texturized Motions and just drag and drop it onto my text. I'm not drag and dropping it onto my background, but on my text. And here, by default, I got like this effects, right? Before, I also have some added dimensions onto this text. That is by adding a long shadow onto it. And let me just drop long shadow onto the text. And now, let's go to the effects. And I want my long shadow before my texturized motions, okay? I think the important things here to understand is that the processing order is like really important. So if I am using my long shadow after my texturized motions, it will give me like this result instead of that. So here, let me just play around with the angle. Maybe, I don't know, 45, something like that, or maybe something like.
Hey, Max, we have a couple of quick comments, if you don't mind touching on this. So there's a comment about if there's a RAM preview, but maybe you could turn on your auto render and just showcase that, depending on what I'll just talk to it real quick. Depending on whatever your computer you have, and also, of course, what's inside of the computer. If you're on a PC, or if you're on a Mac and you're on a unified situation, your playback will get that much better.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll automatically start caching all of your file.
Yeah.
So if you leave it for just a moment, you can even set if you want that to be a 30-second delay, or if you want that to be like within 10 seconds, you don't touch the mouse.
Exactly.
Start to cache.
And that's actually, you can set it up here inside Resolve. If you go to playback and you go to render cache, and if you set to smart, it is actually being smart. And anytime you left your mouse like idle, and then it will start caching your effects. But for this purpose, I'm not going to do that. And so yeah, in this case, I have my long shadow first. And then after that, I have my luster and I have my texturized motion. So I got like this type of effects, right? So similar like this, except that this is like rainbowy and there's like electricity going on. And that is like really easy to achieve. We can create electricity effect by using Electrify and just drag and drop it to our text. And just by default, I quite like it already. And here, what I'm going to do is that, okay, I'm just going to change the color to the color that I probably like, maybe something like that, or even something more toward green like that. All right. It's still tealy-ish. Sorry, guys. because I'm changing the color in the long shadow, not with the Electrify. Look at me. Right? So let me just change it to green, something like that. And here, perhaps a little bit more yellow. And there you go. I got like this effects. And to create like this chromatic aberrations effects, I can use ChromaTown to sweeten everything up. So ChromaTown.
Hey Max, sorry to
Yes.
stop you. I think
No problem.
if you're opening any windows, and maybe you can refresh your side on the stream. I think it's not coming through.
Okay. Let me just remove it.
And then also just really quick to talk about the caching thing, you're gonna get a red outline on the top.
Exactly. So if I go to my playback and I set it to render cache smart, and as soon as I do that, the effect is actually caching, as you can see. The one that turning blue is actually caching the effects. And now when I play over this particular clip, I got like a real-time playback situations. So for this one, let me just reset my render cache to none. And so yeah, that's like literally the effects that I created, except that in the background, it's still a little bit too clear. And in order to dirty it up a little bit, I'm using the VHS and just drag and drop it onto the background and reduce the opacity by changing blend with original to something like that. And really quick, I can get like that effect, right? Like really quick. So if you notice, one particular thing's really nice with the motion picture, with the texturized motions, is this option to posterize source time. So if you're familiar with a lot of like a old film, there's like this effect that they call step printing. And in step printing, you got like this jittery effects, as if like time is like moving really slow, but everything is just like super fast. I mean, I really do a bad job in explaining it, but if you watch a Wong Kar-wai movie called Chungking Express, you'll see like this effects is like used a lot. And I use just texturized motions to this clip to generate exactly that effect. So if we play the clip, you'll see the effect. So right. So as the subject is running forward, I introduce like this jittery feel onto it, and that is literally achieved by using just texturized motions. And for that, I actually did that inside color page. So in the color page, if you want to use Universe, every single Universe tool is living inside the effects panel over here. So if you open the OFX, let me just create one new node. So if you click the effects and you type in uni and dot, you'll see all the Universe effects that you can find inside the color page. And they're exactly like the same Universe tool that available in the other page. So what I did here, so if I can walk you through a little bit, if I disable everything, I have a log clip coming from Sony A7S II, and I just work inside a color managed framework, and that is by going into ACES to normalize my clip. And by using like just a standard color corrections, by playing around with the contrast and then playing around with the exposure and adding the balance and also the saturations, I can get into like this result really quick. And what I did is that I just add texturized motions. And here in the texturized motions, I select crumpled paper. And I have posterized source time check and invert texture. So if I have invert texture deselected, I have a brighter image. So I can just use like the invert texture, and the texture blend mode remains in its original, just in the overlay mode. And what I did here is that I don't animate my rotations. I just animate the scale, animate the positions, and that's literally it. How I can create like this, how do you call it? The step printing effects. And to sell that effects, to make it a little bit more sweet, I add motion blur. And motion blur, the motion blur that I'm using is actually the Resolve motion blur. So if I reset this, if I go to effects and just type in motion, I have like motion blur effects, and I just use it exactly in the default stage. And just by pairing texturized motions with a posterized source time with motion blur, I can get like that effects really quick. So the next one is that I was inspired by this image. So I was browsing internet the other day and I stumbled upon this like fancy image, which I really love. And as you can see, like I really like the text, this title, and then the subtitle over there. And I want to recreate everything with Universe. And I think you can do that with Universe really quick by using the tool that I already mentioned before. And in this case, same like before, the grading is nothing special. It is just going into ACES and adding a film print emulations using Magic Bullet looks. So let me just walk you through everything. The first thing is that I set up the working environment so that I can work inside color manage workflow. That is inside ACES. And here I'm going from red into ACESicity, and on my way out, I'm going from ACESicity onto Rec 709. And then I move forward and do normal balancing like before. So adding some contrast, reducing some contrast in this case. And let me close this. And then playing around with the exposure, playing around with the balance, and then also increasing the saturations. And on top of that, I also create noise. I also use noise reductions to reduce the noise so I can have like a softer image. And then on top of that, I add like this several window that actually doing a lot of like the heavy lifting. So the first thing is that, sorry, let me just enable this. The first thing is that a window. So if I go to power window, a window. So a window that tackle the brightness on this side of the screen, and also a window that how do you call it? That exactly on that was created on the middle of the screen, and that is just to create some like this vignette effects. So I create just a normal circle windows, but the aspect is reduced into 0. And then I create an outside node, and in this outside node, I reduce the contrast. Meanwhile, here in the first window, I have the exposure. I have the exposure turned down. That is by using gain control, and also in the second. In here, in this window, I have exactly the same window like previous one, but that is just to tackle sharpness. So I just increase the sharpness only on the middle of the screen. So if I zoom it in, if you can see that, it's like I'm just adding a teeny tiny bit sharpening exactly just in the middle of the screen. And the next thing is that because I know that there will be a text here. So if I go to my timeline, if you click timeline here, you'll be able to access the same timeline in the edit page. So if I disable my my video source 2 and my video source 3, you'll see that there's no text. But since I know that I will be creating text here, I just use the heat wave. And I'll talk to you about heat wave later on, after we're talking about creating the text. And the next one is that I just use the the look of a film, that is by using Magic Bullet looks to create the overall look as if everything was printed onto film. And after that, I trim the black level. So if I open my Magic Bullet looks, I think it will show you the adjustment that I did is that I'm just using film print and adding some grain. And also I use the optical diffusions to soften the highlights. Meanwhile, the working space is set into ACCT. So input ACCT and output same as input, right? So that's what literally the look of Magic Bullet looks. So if I go back again into edit page, now we can try to create the text. So the like a pro text, like here, it's just a text without an effect. So instead of doing that, why don't we create the commute text and make it fancier? So here, if I just type in commute and select font, same like before, Roboto, maybe something like that, play around with the size, and play around with a font face, maybe italic, where is it? Roboto black and italic. Okay.
Hey Max, real quick, just don't forget to give Jason a chance to do the Fusion page as well.
Okay, real quick. I'm just positioning here, and that's it. So the first thing that I did here, like before, is that I use Luster. So Jason, 5 minutes. I'll be done in 5 minutes. Okay.
No problem.
So as you can see, before we make things, before we turn our text into compound clip, we cannot use the effect. So we need to turn it as a compound clip. And as I turn it into compound clip and drag and drop Luster, I can have that. So if I go to my effects, under source, I don't want to use gradient, but I want to use original color. And here, same as before, I will reduce glossiness down to something like 5. And now I can start to play around with the fire effects. And as you probably already guessed it, the fire itself, it's coming from Electrify. If I drag and drop it here. And by default, I have like this effects happening. What I did is that first we go into the presets. I think that's a really nice way to, to start your adjustment. Go into presets, window shop, and tweak it from there. Okay. So I have like this plasma fire things going on. And if I play, it is animated. So what I want to do is that I want like those thin line around the edges. So what I can do perhaps before moving forward, let me just change the blend mode into none. So I can just see the effect by itself, right? And then after that, I'll play around with the distortion, maybe just turn it down into 0. So we can see the effects. And then after that, we can go to the matte settings. And here I can play around with the brightness, maybe bring it up, and play around with the contrast, maybe something like that, to make it just like a little bit more obvious. And from there, I can lower the brightness slightly. In the distortion settings, probably around 5, or maybe that's too much, around 8, something like that. And after that, we can go into the matte scale. Where is it? Matte scale. There you go. And maybe reduce it down to 0, something like that. So it's like a very smooth effect. Something like that. Maybe 0 is a little bit much. 5. Yeah, something like that. And then after that, perhaps I want to change the evolution speed down to 0. Where is the evolution speed? There we go. Set the evolution speed down to 0. So I can have something like that. And instead of having it scrolling on the y-axis, I want to have it scrolling on the horizontal axis, and that is by having it scrolling on the x-axis. So on the scroll mat scroll y, I'll set it to 0, and here perhaps set it around -15. Yeah, something like that. And then now we can just reduce the glow intensity a little bit. Something like that. And now, since you already have this fiery effects going on, the blend mode is like literally up to you, right? So if you remember, we already have luster before. So if you want to have a text with the beveled edges and you want to show it on top of like this fiery effects, you can blend that using the blend mode. So for example, if you change it to darken, you can have like that type of effects, or if you add it to add, you have like this effects like before. But to my liking, and for like this old text over here, what I did is that, let me delete this. What I did is that I set the blend mode back to none. So blend mode in the Electrify onto none instead of add. So there you go. That's there's a little tips and technique that you can use inside Universe. You can use Universe in cut page, edit page, and color page. And as Jason will show you quickly, you can also use it inside Fusions. So it's like literally up to you, where do you want to use it? And Jason, shall I share your screen? And
go for it.
Okay, let me just share your screen. All right, Jason.
Cool. So I think one thing I'll just address, Jesus asked a question, is there any benefit to doing all that in the color page versus the edit page other than the node tree? You can use effects wherever you like, wherever you prefer. I quite like playing with Fusion because of the nodes. I find nodes a really cool way of dealing with things, which I'll show you a trick in a minute, which is something that in a node-based compositing scenario, it's much easier to do certain things than, say, After Effects. But to get started, for those who haven't used Fusion, I'm in the edit page and I've just stacked 3 shots up that I want to use to build a composite. And the nice thing here is I can just select those shots, right click and create a new Fusion clip. And you'll see that then collapses it into a single clip, which when that's selected, if I go to the Fusion page down at the bottom here, it will take us through to the Fusion page. And you'll see automatically it's created our 3 layered shots with 2 merge tools and then an output tool. So it's sort of done the setup for us already, and then you can move the nodes around. And this is the reason I like it compared to, say, After Effects, is you can then drop tools wherever you want, anywhere in the chain, and you can keep expanding on it. I'll go to a couple of examples. I just did this one to show you getting the layers in here. But a couple of things I built just playing around. This could be like an idea for a movie trailer. So if I just sort of play that through, see that's got a couple of elements in it. And if we go inside Fusion, so again, I'll just stop on the tool because that's a Fusion clip that I created. And you can see here what we've got. So there's a couple of things. It looks quite detailed, and the nice thing is you can keep adding things on top of it. Excuse me. Another reason I quite like Fusion, if you're doing compositing work, quite often you do things like, you can look at different stages. You can see every tool. I don't know if you can see this, but every tool at the bottom, there's 3 tiny black dots. The left dot is for the small viewer, or it used to be called a small viewer, but the secondary window. The middle dot is for the right window, and the right dot is for an external monitor, which obviously you can't see here, but I have one to my right, which is a proper broadcast monitor. So the nice thing here is you can look at different parts and you can see 2 images at the same time. So for example, we can have a look at this merge tool, and I can put that on the small monitor by clicking there. So you can see now at this point of the composite, we're viewing it on this screen, and at the media out, we're seeing on the main screen. So we can always keep our eye on the final result. And I find this a really useful tool. So for example, when you're playing with the chroma key settings, which I've already set up the chroma key, excuse me, quite often I might look at the chroma key side, and it's a nice way of seeing the chroma key relatively clean. Obviously the edges are not very good, but you can see I've used a crop tool to get rid of that. So we can look at that. You can see using the transform, I've made her bigger and cropped out the edges. So basically the idea with the compositing is that you're compositing layers on top of each other. So you can see this is basically just a still image called forest plate, which is just a still photograph of a forest. And then on top of that, I've got a simple text layer, which is just the word destruction, which could be what this film's called. And then to make the text look cool, I've added a Universe Luster tool, which is the one that Max was just using. It makes a sort of glassy metallic look. And it also comes with the drop shadow built in, so you can see the subtle shadow under the letters that lifts it off the background a bit. And then if we look at that merge here, so you can see at that point, following this path of these tools, which I can move up here, you've got basically the text on top. A merge tool allows you to get, so basically then we've got the chroma key, which I've color corrected, and we merge that on top. So if we have a look at this composite here, so there she is in front of the text. Now, the nice thing about a merge tool, which you'll notice later on, a merge tool is basically how to add two different layers on top of each other, and you also have a matte channel if you want to use a matte, which I'll show you on the next example. I then use a transform just to zoom it all in a bit more, and then sort of slowly building effects one at a time, and you can keep, this is what I was saying, you can add things later. So when I build this, I sort of start adding tools wherever I want. So here we've added ChromaTown just to sort of smear the edges. And then I've added a bit of heat wave. Now the heat wave I added later because I've got this plate of fire, and you can see it's an old-fashioned 4x3 shot in the old days of analog television that I just happened to hoard and keep digging up. So obviously because it's so small, I've had to zoom it in. So we've put a transform on that just to make it bigger. And then I've used the Red Giant Unmultiply tool, or Unmult, and basically that just sort of cuts out the fire, and it's really quite a useful tool. You just drop it on and it doesn't do it, it just cuts it out perfectly. So now what I've done here is, instead of using the standard merge tool in Fusion, I've used Universe Modes, which takes it a step further. So if we click on this first merge, within the merge tool, which is how the green arrow layer is being composited on top of the background yellow. So you've got a green foreground and the yellow background. And basically the merge tool is how these two will be composited together. Excuse me, frog in my throat. So as usual, I'm using an over, a normal apply mode over, and you've got all the different blend modes that you're familiar with seeing. Where the modes tool is quite cool is if we click on that, you've actually got an add and a secondary mode. So you can turn that into any of the other formats, and then you can actually do a mix between. So where an add normally adds the brightest pixels of both images together, you can blend it between, say, an add and multiply to create quite weird looking effects. So this is a way of using modes in place of the traditional merge tool, which just gives you crazy control. You can control by color channels and do all kinds of wacky things. So as we sort of follow along, I've then using modes again to add smoke over the top, which just sort of creates a sort of texture like we're looking through the smoke generated off the fire. Also, that's why I've added this heat wave tool, which if we turn that off, you can see there it's quite subtle, but it's distorting the letters and the girl. So that way it looks like the fire is creating a heat haze, which distorts the image. Then smoke over the top. Then just to make it, excuse me, a bit more interesting, I've added a camera shake over the whole thing to create camera movement so it all looks a bit handheld. And then the final layer in this case is retrograde, which I've just used to make it look like sort of old damaged film. And you can see it's added the film grain, bad edges, and it sort of blends it all quite nicely. And she looks like she's part of the scene. It almost looks like I've cleverly added the text between something of the girl shot in that forest. So I'll just jump back out to go to the second example. This is something silly I built just playing around. It's basically a picture of a girl, a witch. So I've created the ball and everything else. In fact, I can play it because there's a preview of it. So you can see she's got this sort of plasma ball that she sort of pushes out of the image. So if we go into that, so same thing, select it and go into Fusion. You can see it doesn't actually have as many tools as the last one. And you can see here again, we've got the witch loaded in the left monitor and we've got the media out in the right monitor. So again, this is brilliant, as I said, for when you're playing with a chroma key. You can make sure you've got a really nice key. Obviously, she's really well lit, but my scene is quite dark and grim. So I've taken a lot of the chroma out. So if we look at this first merge, so there she is just added onto that background frame. Then the dent tool I actually added this morning, but so if I put this back to the media out so we can see the final thing, a couple of the nice things here is I've used this dent tool, which if we have a look at that on the left monitor, so again, this is really cool that you can sort of keep jumping backwards and forwards between looking at multiple images simultaneously, which is amazing for when you're compositing. And it's one of the things I miss using After Effects. You've only got the one main monitor. And in fact, if you wanted to look at a section partway through, you have to turn off and sort of make layers invisible, whereas this, I can just look at any bit I want. I can also see how it looks without the dent tool, so you can switch it on and off to see the impact it's having. And you can see the impact in both, so you can see what it's doing in here. But a cool example here is there's a couple of tools. So I've got a lens flare, which I'm adding, which you can see has got some streaks, and it's just using the Knoll Light Factory EZ, which is part of the Universe toolkit, and I've just picked a flare that I thought would work well. I haven't really played with any of the settings. We then have a chromatic aberration, which I've just created this sort of smeary effect. You can see the colors tearing here, so you get color separation. Now the trick is I'm actually using an ellipse, which if we look at that here, it's basically just a white blob that I've created inside Fusion, using that as the mat for where this tool has effect. So you can see the blue input on any of these tools allows you to use a mat to control where this effect is working. And for example, if I turn the ellipse off, we're looking at the chromatic displacement on this side. If I turn this ellipse off, you can see it's actually destroying the whole image. But by using that ellipse, it constrains it to where that circle is. The only keyframing I've done, you can see the green path in here, is basically as she does the hand movement, you can see it just flies off that shape. So the cool thing is when I added the dent this morning, which I just added in, rather than have to follow the animation, I know the only thing I need to control is the position. I've actually scaled it up slightly, which you can see some keyframes here and here, where I've just made the scale grow. But rather than have to reanimate the position, what I can do is come over to the position side, right-click, and connect to, which isn't available because I've already done it, but connect to a path. And because I've only got one path in the scene, I just connected it to that path. And now you can see, without actually keyframing it, it sort of flies off with the image. But here's another thing I like about node-based compositing. If we look at, we look at this version, the lens flare, which I've got behind the chromatic distortion, deliberately to cause an effect, I feel like it should be distorted by the dent. So something you can do really quickly, which is not quite as easy, is if I hold down the shift key, you can see it breaks that tool away from the path, but now I can drag it in front. And now you can see the lens flare has also been distorted which creates a really cool looking image. I then wanted to make it look a bit more interesting. So I've used the fractal background generator just to create some animation. You can see black and white animation. And I've used that to drive the Electrify tool. So it just creates a crazy pink Electrify. So all I've done there is go on to choose a preset, chosen, I think it was the top one. I won't wait for that to open up. And then change the color to pink. And then we've done another merge. And you can see in here these pink sort of fiery electric looks. And again, I'm using the ellipse to constrain it to within that circle, which again, if I turn off the ellipse, you can see we then get all the effects just all over everything. And then again, we've got a bit of fog just to sort of add another layer in. But where I think this is cool is I actually normally always keep the main output here because this is the most important image. And then when you're playing with this merge and adding fog, you can always look at that on one side, add the fog and just make sure you get the blend right how you want it. And then I've added Misfire, another Universe tool, which makes it look like old film, it creates sort of a vignette on the edges, adds a bit of grain, and makes it look a bit more film-like. And then on top of that, I've added a Magic Bullet Looks, which isn't part of the Universe toolkit, but if you have Red Giant Complete, you have access to that. And that basically just adds another level of grading over the top. And you can see here, for example, if we look back at, we load up this on the left monitor, she looks obviously stuck on top of the background that she doesn't match, whereas here it looks like it's all pretty much lit the same and she's holding this big plasma ball. And it's all quite cool. It didn't take a huge amount of time to build, and it's just something you can play with. And by compositing the smoke and everything, the smoke sort of adds to the light and it sort of blends everything together quite seamlessly. But I think for me, if I were doing compositing, I would probably always use the Fusion page, especially over, say, layers in the edit page. That effect is that adding Red Giant tools in there is really cool for quick things, but if you really want to get quite a lot of tools in, just the fact you can sort of reorder the order of tools as quick as that. In fact, you can see the impact that had completely changes it. And the fact you can experiment with things quite simply of the order of the tools really changes the way something looks. Obviously, you've also got the keyframe panel that you can control all the keyframing. Let's zoom in a bit more, go back. I'm a bit rusty on the old navigating my way around the controls, but there we go, I've lost it completely. But you can animate the keyframes. This, other than the line, doesn't really have much keyframing to deal with. But the fact that you can play as much as you want, and you can even sort of group things, and if you want to tidy it up, we can create a group. So now we know that's just the chroma key. We could rename that to chroma key. It's quite a nice way to think because we're happy with the chroma key and then we just sort of tidy it up, and we can always sort of double click to see what's in there, and we can still go and add new tools inside there. So it's quite powerful. The one thing I didn't actually show you is where to find the tools. Up on the top left here, we have effects, and you can see within the OpenFX is all the Universe tools, and you can literally just grab those and drag them. You can see the line changes to blue and yellow. You can drag things down, and you can see instantly we've added a glow on top of it, which also looks quite cool. So the power to just keep playing and sort of adding more and more to it and tidying it up, it's quite a nice way to work, I think. So there you have it. That's pretty much all I've got to show you in a short burst of time, but shows you the sort of capabilities of what can be done in Fusion and the difference between Fusion and After Effects, I think.
Yeah, I really like that, Jason. And seeing everything as a node, it's like seeing a map or seeing a blueprint. And like what you pointed out previously, you can just go exactly on specific steps and then tweak it just exactly there.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a shortcut when you want to like show the particular nodes in monitor 1 or monitor 2, and that is by simply pressing the number key 1 or 2.
Yeah, look at that. See, we're all learning.
And that's my favorite one. Awesome.
Cool.
Right.
Well, I think that answers that goes back to that comment or that question of
Yes.
is there a benefit to using it in the color page, the edit page, or even in the Fusion page?
Yeah, Jesus has a question. I think there. Is there any benefit of doing everything in color page versus edit page, or maybe Fusion page as well? Well, I think in my humble opinion, Jesus, it's like really depends on you. That's the thing. It's like this page are like pretty flexible. Depends on how you like it. If you're familiar with the editing, if you're coming from editing background, staying in editing and adding layers on top of that, you can still work like that. And or if you want to composite inside, to do compositing inside Fusions, you can also do that. But as I pointed out last week, no, not last week. Yes, last week. Sorry, in Maxon Color episodes, I did a compositing, green screen compositing, same like what Jason did in Fusions, but everything was done inside a color page. So my reason why I did that in color page is that because I have my favorite tools ready for me. So for example, if I want to do like the look of film emulations, I can do that like really easy. So I don't have to emulate that in sort of like in different page. And that's the beauty, because everything is like very flexible. It really depends on how you like it. Hopefully that answered your question. So let me check the comments if there are any other questions from the audiences. Seems like we're good. And thank you so much once again that you allow that that I'm sorry that we run over time today. And thank you so much for your understanding because of the connection problem that I have previously. That was embarrassing. Sorry for that. And let me share my screen and let me point you out into the PDF file that you can download in the descriptions of the YouTube page. So if you go to the YouTube page and then the stream page of this sessions, you will be able to follow a link to the Dropbox, and inside the Dropbox you'll find the PDF file, and you can go to the Maxon merch store and get one of this merchandise for you by using the code Universe for editors.
I don't think you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Let's do it. Let's do it one more time.
Let's do it one more time. Okay. Let me share my screen. Can you see it? No, it's still the old screen from before.
Still see Resolve. Yeah, you have to point it to open to your web browser.
Let me hold on.
I'm going to have to run, I'm afraid, so I'll leave you guys to finish off.
Well, thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much, Jason.
No problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jason. See you next week.
See you later.
See ya. So, sorry guys. If you follow the PDF file, you'll be able to go to the Maxon merch store and get one of this merchandise, and that is by using the password Universe for editors. Okay, and the recording of this episode will be uploaded into YouTube, and that is under our YouTube channel, Maxon Training Team, and it will be time-stamped as well. So if you want to skip the internet connection problem that I have, you can just like go skip directly onto that, right? And in the next episode of Demystifying Post Productions, Tony will join us next week to talk about Universe inside Final Cut Pro. So I hope to see you all next week. And Tony, thank you so much for joining us today, Tony. Absolutely. And everybody else in the audience. And I wish you a good start on the week. And see you next week.
All right. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Bye-bye.